tech company, devoting time to his family and his community. And he is so, my heart, part of the reason I ran for office is obviously because I believe that in this world there is many acts of kindness and tzedakah. Passing from generation to generation, Lador, in our hearts, by encouraging those around us to repair the world and make it a better place to live for ourselves, for our children, each and every day. So ladies and gentlemen, I just give a hearty mazel tov today to our friend, Harley Littman.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. It's a privilege to have you join us. Our next speaker is Senator Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine is the junior senator from Virginia. He was elected to the Senate in 2012 and was re-elected in 2018. Prior to serving in the Senate, Senator Kaine was first elected to office as a Richmond City Councilor. He went on to be mayor of Richmond, Virginia, lieutenant governor of Virginia, and governor of Virginia. He also, along the way, chaired the Democratic National Committee. In 2016, Senator Kaine was the Democratic nominee for Vice President of the United States. Senator Kaine was born in Minnesota and moved to the Kansas City area at the age of 2. His mother taught him at 18, something near and dear to my heart, as some of you in the audience know. And then received his undergraduate degree from the University of Missouri. He began legal studies at Harvard Law School, but took a year off to assist Jesuit missionaries in Honduras run a school. Obviously, his commitment to public service and education was clear at that early time. Returning to Harvard, Senator Kaine received his law degree in 1983. He met his future wife, Ann Holton, at Harvard Law School, and after their wedding, they moved to her hometown of Richmond, Virginia. And as they say, the rest is history. In the Senate, Senator Kaine serves on the Armed Services, Foreign Relations, Budget, and Health Committees better, while ensuring a strong defense and robust diplomacy allowed him to jump right back into his work in the Senate. The nation should be thankful that he did. I'm privileged to call him a good friend, Senator Tim Kaine.
Thank you so much. I want to thank Greg for his kind introduction. And this is an annual. I come every year to the Jewish American Heritage Month commemoration. Sometimes I'm even the Senate sponsor of the room, which you have to have a sponsor. And as it worries us, it's we agreed to get the sponsorship.
How does it feel to be honored today?
Well, it feels wonderful. It's great being an American Jew. It's really extraordinary history that American Jews have had here, because it's the one place in the world where you could be completely Jewish and be completely American, and they're both compatible. Same thing for Italian Americans who love Italy. They could be American and Italian, or Irish who support the Irish against the British and be Irish American. So it's a wonderful thing.
Do you think this month is more important now more than ever because we've seen attacks on synagogues in the United States?
Yes, of course. Of course. It really is. I mean, it goes back to, it reminds me of George Washington, who in 1790 addressed the Jewish community in Rhode Island at a synagogue. And he said, "You are fully welcome. We will not accept persecution and bigotry." So it really set the tone, and even with the problems we have now with the rise of anti-Semitism, it makes events like this all the more meaningful.
Why do you think you were honored?
Well, you have to ask the committee. The criteria is the American Jewish leader who's had the greatest impact. So I suppose part of that is the Taylor Force Act, my role in being able to get the Democrats on board to support the effort to stop funding the Martyrs Fund that the Palestinian Authority has that rewards people who kill Jews. The more Jews you kill, the more money you get. I think that was probably the most significant aspect. And I think probably my efforts to build a coalition of moderate nations in the Persian Gulf with Israel against Iran.
Now, is it fair to say you're more progressive leaning or more democratic leaning? Or how would you define yourself politically?
I am bipartisan and nonpartisan, so I try to be above the fray. I have good relationships on both sides of the aisle, probably stronger on the Democratic side.
There's accusations that President Trump is either, these dog whistles to anti-Semites or that he's the best president ever for Israel. What's your take on all that?
Well, it's a complicated issue and complicated question, but what I could say in essence, when it comes to Israel, there's arguably not been a better president. We all know, moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, accepting Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights where there are no Palestinians, it's Druze, and that's very important. Tremendous assistance and military aid has been better than arguably any other president, and we've always enjoyed support on both sides of the aisle, but Trump has been a remarkable supporter of the state of Israel. When it comes to domestic issues, there are people who are struggling with that. I'm trying to be above the fray and be able to engage all sides. We're all American, and try to work it out where we're united, and we'll figure it out. I have a lot of confidence in the United States.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Was that good?
That was great. Anything else you want to add?
Yes, there are so many things that make me proud, but one is philanthropy. Jews make up maybe 1% to 2% of the population in the United States, but Jews give over 40% to the philanthropies in the United States. Over 40% of the money comes from Jewish Americans. So I'm very proud of that. That speaks to Tikkun Olam, making the world a better place and giving back, and I think that speaks to today's event.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicely said. Okay, so first of all, what's your role here?
We are the Project Legacy's the sponsor of the Jewish Heritage Celebration, Jewish American Heritage Celebration.
And how long have you been?
On it?
Yeah, but we're just talking.
Oh,
this is for me.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Don't worry, it's conversation.
Oh, okay.
How long have you been holding this event on Capitol Hill?
I believe 10 years. It started over in the Capitol itself, but it expanded. It became so popular that we moved into the Kennedy Caucus Room, which, as you know, is a very historic venue. Some of the most controversial, contentious hearings were held here, but we all come together, for one brief shining moment. Jews come together and we celebrate our heritage, celebrate the great country in which we live in, and we acknowledge the contributions of our community, of our people, to the great United States of America.
And why Harley Lipman? Why are you choosing to honor him?
Because Harley embodies Jewish heritage. He's a proud Jew. He understands that being blessed means giving back, tikkun olam, trying to repair the world. Harley embodies that. He symbolizes that, whether it's an orphanage in Cambodia that he supports, or whether it's mass graves in Poland that he helps identify and restore, mass graves of Jews who were killed in the Holocaust. He doesn't forget his people, and he contributes so much to the fabric of life here in the United States that it was by unanimous consent.
Wow, unanimous consent, that's rare amongst Jews. Let me ask you this. There have been shootings at synagogues in the United States. Does that make this event more important than ever?
Look, it's always important to celebrate Jewish heritage. Obviously, at a time like this, it reinforces the notion that we, the Jewish people, have contributed so much to make this country great. And it allows us and allows the greater community, non-Jews and Jews alike, to celebrate each other's diversity. But for the month of May, which Jewish heritage is celebrated in, it reminds everyone how much we've contributed. If you look at the different facets of accomplishments that great Americans have done in science, in sports, in communal life, in business, it's been Jews that were at the forefront of this, and we're so proud of it. Even look at civil rights in every sphere of life. And for us, it's important that we come together and we celebrate it once a year during the month of May.
Now, this is a bipartisan group of Congress members that you have here, but the subject of Israel and anti-Semitism is really in the forefront right now. There are those who accuse the Democratic Party of being anti-Semitic. There are those who accuse President Trump of being anti-Semitic. What's your read on all of that?
For one brief shining moment, we come together. This is nonpartisan. We acknowledge members of both parties. We invite members of both parties equally. We have here today Assistant Secretary of Treasury who represents the Trump administration. We have liberal Democrats, but there are no labels here today. Everyone here is gathered together to celebrate Jewish heritage, and we do it as friends.
And that's something rare in Washington, I imagine.
Very rare. That's why, look at the crowd here. It's filling up. Everyone wants to be part of this. And at the end of the day, I think everyone wants to get along. We just have to encourage them.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ezra.
I'm going to have Greg.
If you can just say your name and spell it for me.
Greg Rosenbaum, Gregrosenbaum.
Why do you find it important to hold this event every year?
Well, Jewish American Heritage Month is extremely important because the story of Jewish contributions to American life needs to be told not from Jews to Jews, but Jews to non-Jews. And so this event represents a commitment in the nation's capital to the concept of Jewish American heritage. And we get to honor a person like Harley Lipman this year, other honorees in the past, who have made those kinds of contributions that a lot of people in America don't know about. And so to me, this event is a capstone in the nation's capital with a number of senators and representatives coming to talk about the importance of a man like Harley Lipman to American life and about the importance of American Jews in general.
I'm not sure you know this, but there's a push now to establish a Jewish caucus
Yes,
on
I'm
Capitol Hill.
aware.
What do you think about that?
I have mixed feelings because I've talked to a number of senators and representatives about it. The thought process on one side goes, there are a number of issues that are important to American Jews and they reach across party lines, so we ought to have a caucus that is facing Jewish issues alone, regardless of partisanship. On the other hand, there are a number of people who are opposed to the idea because it makes Jewish issues something different from American issues. And in that sense, it somewhat runs counter to this whole concept of Jewish American Heritage Month.
I can't help but to bring up, recent shootings at a Chabad house and a synagogue in the United States. There are fears of rising anti-Semitism here and in Europe. Do you feel like this event is more important than ever because of that?
Absolutely. To me, the answer to ignorance and anti-Semitism, which are two sides of the same coin to me, is education. And the more that we can get the word out to people who know any better, that a lot of the things they love in life, like Marvel Comics and superheroes, were created by Jewish Americans and are a lasting contribution to American life, we hope to change minds.
This is a bipartisan, nonpartisan event, but you know that anti-Semitism, Israel has become a flashpoint here in Washington, with both sides accusing the other of being anti-Semitic. What's your read on that?
To me, it in some sense is a tempest in a teapot. That's not to dismiss its importance, but I think that we sometimes have a hair trigger to call some statement that is not really anti-Semitic in order to get a rise out of people, in order to get attention in the press. I think there is a lot of misinformation on both sides in this almost name-calling type of activity, and I really would urge everyone to cool it.
Can I ask you how you identify politically?
I'm a Democrat. It's fairly easy to determine that. I was the chair of the National Jewish Democratic Council until 2016.
And how do you feel about President Trump in general? Some call him the best friend to Israel. Others say he's, dog whistling to anti-Semites.
I think there's support for both of those arguments. And that's part of the tension that I refer to when I say we really have to cool the rhetoric. Right? Why do we have to go to an extreme statement on either side of that argument? I think that there is room for disagreement between Republicans and Democrats over issues of policy, and we ought to settle those through negotiations. I don't think that name-calling, either as the best or the worst, gets us anywhere.
And name-calling on both sides.
Absolutely.
Hey, that was great. Thank you very much. Right. So, Senator Kaine, you attended this event, Jewish Heritage Month. anti-Semitism, Israel, they've become such big topics here in Washington. Why?
Well, look, I think they're different topics. And anti-Semitism is on the rise all over the United States. You can have different opinions about Israel, and that's not anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is having prejudice against Jewish people, and in an extreme form, a desire to erase Jewish people, either by murder or the murder of people in Charlottesville, the Holocaust, or by forced conversions. That's over history, that's been a powerful weapon of anti-Semitism. So I've introduced a resolution with Ted Cruz. I think it might be the first resolution that he and I drew up together, but it's something that as Democrats and Republicans, even people with some really different views, we are just sickened that we've got Jewish Texans and Jewish Virginians who are a little bit more afraid to walk into the JCC than they were yesterday. They're a little bit more afraid of what's going to happen to them in a worship service in a synagogue than they were a year ago. We're seeing a frightening rise in anti-Semitism, not just elsewhere in the world, but in the country. We got to condemn it. The Israel issues, look, the Middle East, Israel, there's so many challenges there. And so because Israel is a great partner and ally, because we have a defense cooperation agreement with Israel that is unlike any other we have in the world, everything in that region that raises security threats will also raise issues of the U.S.-Israel relationship. So that's going to be a perennial issue. That'll be a perennial issue regardless, the U.S.-Israel relationship. I hope anti-Semitism isn't a perennial issue. I had naively thought, I guess, that we had turned the corner on that in this country and we were more tolerant, but now Jews are subject to more hate crimes than people of any other religious group in this country, and we got to battle it.
But you do know that both sides are accusing the other party of courting anti-Semites or anti-Semitic rhetoric. Do the Democrats have a problem with anti-Semitism? Do the Republicans?
The world has a problem with it, and America has a problem with it. And Ted and I talked about this in drafting our resolution. He could draft a resolution that was punching Democrats in the face, and I would draft a resolution that would talk about Charlottesville and President Trump's lackluster response to clear evidence of anti-Semitism. But we realized we could each draft our own version. We'd feel good, but we wouldn't get it passed. But this is a problem that's bigger than politics. It's a problem of human equality. The key Jeffersonian value is when we're talking about Charlottesville is that in this country we're all equal. We're equal based on our religion, equal based on our, where we come from, who we love, what our skin color is. We've got to stand up for the principles that our Jewish brothers and sisters deserve to be treated with complete equality. And Ted and I, while we have some partisan views too, we said, let's set those aside for the purposes of getting a bill that we think will unify people.
When is that going to be voted on in Iran? Iran is a big issue now. What do you think of the Trump administration strategy?
Well, on the voting, it's not yet clear. So Ted and I are gathering, and we've got 45 to 50 co-sponsors. We're gathering more, and if we get to a critical mass, we might be able to push it right to the floor. I think we should be able to do this by what we call UC, a unanimous consent. On Iran, look, I think it was a horrible thing for the president to pull out of the Iran deal, and I think he's raised the risk of an unnecessary war. I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee. I talked to members of the IDF and Mossad, current and former. I listened to Secretary Mattis, Secretary Tillerson at the time, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Joe Dunford. They all said this agreement is in America's and in the world's national interest. Let's focus on curbing Iran's other bad behavior, but for God's sake, let's not scrap the agreement and give them license to go back to enriching uranium or plutonium. I think the president made a huge mistake in doing it, and now as we hear that they're thinking about war plans to put 120,000 American troops back in the Middle East, possibly in another war, as the father of a member of the Marines, I think that would be idiocy. And especially, I don't think the president should do that without coming to Congress. If he thinks it's a good idea, let him put it on the table here. Let's have a debate and vote and see what Congress thinks. If he's unwilling to bring it to Congress, it suggests he knows he can't convince Congress. If he can't convince Congress it's in America's national interest, we shouldn't be doing it.
I'm going to let you go, but I would love to continue this conversation.
Good. Then she can do it.
Thank you. A Democrat. You know that there have been some Democratic lawmakers who have been accused of using anti-Semitic rhetoric. What's your feelings about that?
Well, they have used anti-Semitic rhetoric, and it's wrong, and we have to call it out, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, whether it's people saying things that are anti-Israel or anti-Jewish, whether it's people who are supporting white nationalism on the other side. We have to call it all out. It's wrong, and we have to stand up strong against it.
So just to be clear, have you spoken to Congresswoman Tlaib or Congresswoman Omar about the remarks that they've made?
I've spoken out publicly against them.
Okay. Okay, and what are lawmakers doing in general, both sides, about anti-Semitism that's rising in this country?
You know, there are people that are trying to divide us on a regular basis. What they don't recognize is we've had resolutions on the floor condemning anti-Semitism, which we were voted for almost unanimously by every single member, Democrat and Republican, on the floor of the House of Representatives. And we need to continue to do that type of thing. Right now, there's just too much hate in our country and throughout the world. Anti-Semitism is real, and it's growing. And we have to be very, very vigilant against it.
Do you think it's also coming from the top, from President Trump, that he's making dog whistles to white nationalists that he's been accused of?
I think there's no question that the president uses some very irresponsible rhetoric on occasion that contributes to people behaving in very, very negative stereotypes. You know, people talk about his comments after Charlottesville, I think, were very irresponsible when he said there are good people on both sides. That was very irresponsible on his part. And he hasn't done enough to call out the white nationalists that have perpetrated crimes in this country. We have to remember that the shootings at the synagogues that have taken place here in the country were not by Muslims, were not by people of a particular party, they were by white nationalists, and we have to condemn white nationalists as well.
Okay, very quickly on Iran, what do you make of the Trump administration's strategy? Do they have a strategy on Iran?
I'm concerned that we don't have a strategy, or we don't know of the strategy being shared with the other branch of government, with the House of Representatives and the Senate. We have to be very careful here. The last thing we want to do is get in a situation where somebody makes a mistake on either side, whether the Iranians or the United States of America, that escalates into a war. There's no question that Iran is one of the worst evil actors on the entire world stage today. Everything they're doing is trying to foment hate and purvey a very, very negative agenda that is very anti-Israel. And we have to do everything we can to fight against them, but we have to be very careful about not getting ourselves into another war that will result. This is not like going against Iraq. You know, this is a very sophisticated country with a serious military, with sophisticated technology and a lot of forces. It's a lot bigger than Iraq. And look how bad Iraq has been as far as being there for as long as we have without any clear-cut gains in the process. Iran would be even worse. And the last thing America needs and the world needs is more war and more refugees and more killing.
Do you think Congress is being frozen out by the administration, not only on Iran, but in general?
I don't know that frozen out is the right expression to use. I think that there's not always the best of communication between the administration and Congress as a whole, especially on matters of international diplomacy and foreign affairs.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very quickly, I-24 News, come on before. We appreciate it.
Okay.
We want to ask you about Iran, sir. Obviously, this is a big issue for you. What is the Trump administration strategy in your mind? Is it a good strategy? Where's your thinking on this?
Well, I don't really know what the strategy is, and that's one of the things that concerns me. And the lack of briefings, particularly of intelligence briefings, as to what is the latest threats that has us drawing down our embassy in Iraq, the largest embassy we have in the world. What is our strategy to bring Iran to the negotiating table? Is there a strategy? Because at the end of the day, as someone who's been the architect of so many sanctions against Iran, the purpose is to bring them to the table to get a good deal, not a bad deal like the JCPOA, but a good deal that stops their pathway towards any nuclear weapons. But if all I do is maximize my pressure without an outlet for you to come to negotiate a good deal, then I worry that we will have unintended or intended consequences, and the consequences of that can have a military complex that would be enormously challenging. So that's why I'm demanding that as the senior Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee, we get briefings on this. I want to know what it is that the intelligence is that has led us to draw down our embassy in Iraq. What is the strategy moving forward now that significant pressure has been created in Iraq economically? How are we trying to use that pressure to get our end result? And I don't understand an administration that could probably have allies, depending upon what their strategy is, not engaging in the information that is critical. You can't make foreign policy and national security decisions in the blind. And that's right now, at this point, what we're being asked to do.
Officials in the administration say it's a maximum pressure campaign to get Iran to start acting normally. Is that not enough of an answer for you?
No, you're not going to just by pressure get them to act normally. You're going to have to get them to a negotiating table to come to an agreement that we can ultimately accept. But they're not going to, if all you do is strangle somebody and you don't give them an outlet, which in this case would be come to negotiation with the European Union to end any pathway towards nuclear weapons, which is our desired goal. And then the result of that would be that they would get relief once we have accomplished our desired goal. But just thinking that you're going to create pressure without how do you have the end game of your desired goal put in place, that's certainly not enough.
Are we going to war? Are you afraid of that?
Well, the one thing we don't need is another Iraq weapons of mass destruction moment. We need to know what the intelligence is. We need to know what is the end game of the administration and how they seek to achieve it. And then we can make intelligent decisions. But when you're evacuating personnel from our largest embassy in the world, then something gives. It's either that you have determined that there's credible intelligence, that they are a threat, and you have to wonder whether that threat is in response to what we have been doing or independently of that, or you are seeking to engage in a military engagement and you want to take your people out of harm's way. Which one it is, I don't know. But at the end of the day, we need to know in order to make the right decisions.
Thank you. Getting enough information from the administration on what's going on with Iran and Iraq.
We very much need more information. We've asked for a briefing. So far, the State Department has declined to provide it. They owe us and the American people a better explanation as to what the threats are and what our response should be.
What should the U.S. do about Iran, given that they're seen as a bad actor in the region? How should the administration counter that?
We need allies. So far, our partners and allies in Europe and around the world have been uninvolved in what we are doing there. We need to reach out to them, and we need to present a united front.
But the administration argues that the nuclear deal was the worst deal. It enabled Iran to behave badly. Should they not have pulled out of it?
Everyone from Secretary Mattis on down counseled against pulling out of the deal, even if they had reservations about the deal itself. And we need to work with our allies, partner with them in this effort to contain Iraq's aggressive actions. There's no question Iran is a bad actor. It needs to be shown that we will not tolerate aggression and terrorism that it is fostering, but we need allies in doing it. We need the information from the administration that will enable us to act wisely.
Thank you so much, sir.